The sound of marble hitting stone echoed through St. Catherine's Chapel like a gunshot. Isabella Santos stood frozen, staring at the fragments of the Virgin Mary statue scattered across the altar steps. Her trembling hands still burned from where she'd grabbed the sacred figure and hurled it from its pedestal. Just 30 minutes earlier, she'd received the phone call that shattered her world. Stage 4, metastasized. 6 months, maybe less. Her mother's voice had been unnaturally calm as she delivered the words that felt like a death sentence, but Isabella heard the tremor underneath, the barely contained terror that mirrored her own. The chapel had been her refuge since childhood, where her grandmother Rosa had taught her to pray the rosary. But today, looking at the serene face of the Virgin Mary, Isabella felt only rage. Where was divine mercy when her mother lay dying? Before we go deeper into this mystery, take a moment to subscribe to Virgin Mary Mysteries. Stories like this are too powerful to experience alone. Now take a moment to share where you're watching from and write Sacred Heart Mercy in the comments. I want to see how far this message of hope is reaching tonight. Isabella fled the chapel as evening shadows crept across the school grounds, her grandmother's rosary beads tangling around her wrist as she ran. She didn't see Father Miguel emerge from the sacristy, didn't witness his shocked expression as he discovered the destruction. The Santos family lived in a modest house on Maple Street, where Isabella's mother Carmen worked double shifts as a nurse. When Isabella burst through the front door that evening, Carmen was sitting at the kitchen table, medical papers spread before her like battle plans. Her dark hair had already begun to thin from chemotherapy. "Mija," Carmen said softly, not looking up. "We need to talk about arrangements." "No," Isabella's voice cracked. "I won't listen to this." Carmen raised her eyes, and Isabella saw her grandmother Rosa's strength reflected there. The same stubborn faith that had sustained 3 generations of Santos women. Running from the truth won't change it, Isabella. But running from God will only make the pain worse. That night, guilt gnawed at Isabella's chest. She'd destroyed something sacred, something her grandmother had saved months to donate to the school chapel before cancer claimed her life 2 years ago. The statue had been Rosa's final act of devotion, and Isabella had shattered it in her anger. But what happened next would change everything she thought she knew about divine mercy. Because at exactly 2:47 a.m., as Isabella finally drifted into restless sleep, the first protection began in a way that would leave everyone questioning whether coincidence could explain what was about to unfold. The knock at the door came soft but insistent, pulling Isabella from dreams filled with broken marble. The person standing on their doorstep at nearly 3 a.m. would deliver news that should have been impossible for anyone to know, and would mark the beginning of 6 miracles that would transform not just Isabella's life, but an entire community's understanding of how heaven responds to a heart breaking in despair. The visitor at their door was Mrs. Chen from 3 houses down, clutching a bathrobe around her thin frame. Her eyes were wide with panic as she spoke in rapid whispers about the gas smell coming from the Martinez family's basement next to Isabella's house. Something was wrong, dangerously wrong. And somehow Mrs. Chen had felt compelled to wake up in the middle of the night and check on her neighbors. By dawn, the fire department had discovered a massive gas leak that would have killed the Martinez family in their sleep within hours. As emergency crews worked, Isabella watched from her bedroom window, her mind spinning with questions she didn't want to ask. Why had Mrs. Chen woken up? Why had she known to check that specific house? And why did the timing feel connected to her act of destruction just hours before? But to understand what was truly beginning, we must go back 2 years to when Isabella's world first started to crack. Rosa Santos had been more than a grandmother to Isabella. She'd been her anchor, her teacher, her safe harbor when Isabella's father walked out on them when she was only 8 years old. Manuel Santos had left behind nothing but debt and a daughter who stopped sleeping through the night. Rosa moved in the next week, bringing her worn leather Bible, her silver rosary, and an unshakable faith that had carried her through decades of hardship. Every evening, she and Isabella would kneel together in the living room, Rosa's weathered hands guiding Isabella's small fingers along the rosary beads. "Mija," Rosa would whisper, "the Virgin Mary knows what it means to watch someone you love suffer. She understands a mother's heart." For 7 years, Rosa was Isabella's constant. She attended every school event, every doctor's appointment when Carmen had to work late shifts. She taught Isabella to braid her hair the way Santos women had done for generations and instilled a devotion to the Virgin Mary that became the foundation of Isabella's identity. The statue at St. Catherine's Chapel had been Rosa's dream project. She saved $20 every month from her small pension, keeping the bills in an old coffee tin. "This will be my gift to the school. Ma," she told Isabella proudly, "something beautiful for all the children to pray to long after I'm gone." Rosa never got to see her statue installed. Cancer took her quickly, brutally, in 4 months. Isabella watched her grandmother's body waste away, watched her struggle to whisper Hail Marys between labored breaths, watched her faith never waver even as her body betrayed her. Rosa died clutching her rosary, whispering prayers Isabella could barely hear. The statue was installed 3 months after the funeral, paid for with Rosa's carefully saved money. Isabella attended the dedication ceremony, tears streaming down her face as Father Miguel blessed the marble figure, hands extended in offering, eyes filled with compassion. But last night, when Isabella's fists connected with that sacred marble, she wasn't just destroying a statue. She was destroying the last physical connection to the woman who had taught her that God's love was bigger than abandonment, stronger than fear. And now, as emergency lights flashed across her bedroom wall, Isabella couldn't shake the feeling that Rosa's spirit was somehow stirring, that her act of desecration had awakened something that would demand a response neither she nor her dying mother was prepared to face. School became unbearable the next morning. Word had already spread about the gas leak on Maple Street, and Isabella couldn't escape the whispered conversations. But it was Principal Morrison's concerned look during first period that made her stomach twist. Someone had discovered the destroyed statue. During lunch, Isabella's best friend, Sophia Morales, found her hiding in the library. Sophia had been Isabella's closest companion since middle school, the only person who understood the weight of watching a parent slowly die. "My dad's been sober for 6 months, Sophia whispered. "Mum finally believes it might stick this time. We're actually planning a family vacation for Christmas." Her dark eyes sparkled with hope Isabella hadn't seen in years. That night, Isabella's dreams were unlike anything she'd experienced before. She found herself standing in Sophia's cramped apartment, but the air felt thick, poisonous. She could see the Morales family sleeping peacefully, unaware that something deadly was seeping through their home. The heating system was malfunctioning, pumping carbon monoxide through the vents. In her dream, Isabella could see the invisible gas spreading like fog, reaching toward the bedrooms where Sophia, her parents, and her little brother Miguel lay unconscious. She woke at 4:17 a.m., her heart pounding violently. The dream had felt more real than reality itself. Without thinking, Isabella grabbed her phone and called Sophia's house. It rang 8 times before Sophia's mother, Elena, answered groggily. "Isabella? Mija, it's 4 in the morning. What's wrong?" "Mrs. Morales, there's something wrong with your heating system. You need to get everyone out of the house right now." If this story is pulling you in, subscribe now and tell me in the comments what you believe is really happening. Your insight might reveal something we haven't seen yet. What are you talking about? How do you know about our heating? I can't explain it, but please just trust me. Get everyone outside and call the fire department. Something in Isabella's voice, the raw desperation, the absolute certainty, must have convinced Elena. Within 20 minutes, the Morales family stood on the sidewalk in their pajamas as emergency responders flooded their apartment building. The heating unit had been leaking carbon monoxide for hours. The levels in the bedrooms were dangerously high. Another 2 hours of exposure would have been fatal. Sophia found Isabella at school the next day, tears streaming down her face. "You saved our lives," she whispered. "The firemen said we would have died in our sleep. How did you know?" Isabella couldn't answer because she didn't understand it herself, but as Sophia held her, she felt something shift inside her chest. 2 families had been saved in 2 days. 2 impossible warnings had come through her somehow. That afternoon, Principal Morrison called Isabella to his office. Father Miguel sat beside his desk, hands folded in his lap. Both men looked at her with expressions she couldn't quite read, concern mixed with something that might have been awe. "Isabella," Principal Morrison began carefully, "we need to talk about what happened in the chapel 2 nights ago, and we need to talk about the unusual events that have been occurring since then." Isabella's throat went dry. They knew. Somehow, they had connected her act of destruction with the miraculous warnings that had saved 2 families. But what terrified her most was the question burning in Father Miguel's gentle eyes. If breaking the statue had triggered these impossible protections, what would happen next? "Isabella," Father Miguel's voice was gentle but firm as she sat across from him in the principal's office. "The custodian found the broken statue Tuesday night. The Martinez gas leak happened Wednesday morning. The Morales family was saved Thursday night. These aren't coincidences." Isabella crossed her arms defensively. "People get lucky sometimes." Principal Morrison leaned forward. "2 families could have died, and somehow you knew to warn them." "I didn't know anything," Isabella snapped. "Mrs. Chen woke up because she's a light sleeper. I had a nightmare about carbon monoxide because we learned about it in chemistry class." But even as the words left her mouth, Isabella knew they sounded hollow. The dreams had been too specific, too perfectly timed, yet accepting any other explanation would mean accepting that something beyond her understanding was at work, and that terrified her more than denial. Father Miguel studied her with compassionate eyes. "Your grandmother Rosa had great faith. She believed the Virgin Mary watches over those who—" "My grandmother's dead," Isabella interrupted, her voice rising. "Just like my mother's going to be dead in 6 months. If the Virgin Mary is so powerful, why didn't she save Rosa? Why isn't she saving my mom?" The room fell silent. Isabella's chest heaved with emotion she'd been suppressing for weeks. The anger felt safer than hope, easier than faith. That Friday morning, Isabella almost missed the school bus. She'd overslept and had to sprint 3 blocks to her usual stop. But as she rounded the corner and saw the familiar yellow bus pulling away, something inside her chest seized with panic. Not panic about being late, panic about the bus itself. Her legs stopped moving without conscious decision. She watched as the bus continued down Elm Street toward the highway, and every instinct in her body screamed danger. Instead of chasing the bus, Isabella turned and walked home. She couldn't explain the decision, couldn't rationalize the overwhelming certainty that she needed to stay away from that bus. 2 hours later, Carmen's phone rang at the hospital where she was receiving chemotherapy. It was Principal Morrison, his voice shaken. "Mrs. Santos, there's been an accident. The Route 12 school bus skidded on black ice and rolled over. Several students are injured, some critically. Isabella wasn't on the bus this morning. Do you know why?" Carmen's hand trembled as she held the phone. She looked at her daughter, who had arrived at the hospital an hour earlier, claiming she'd felt sick. That evening, Carmen confronted Isabella in their kitchen. The local news played footage of the overturned bus, emergency vehicles surrounding the wreckage. 3 times, mija," Carmen whispered, tears streaming down her face. 3 times you've been protected or protected others. This isn't coincidence anymore." "It is," Isabella said fiercely, though her voice cracked. "It has to be." Carmen reached across the table and grasped her daughter's hands. "Isabella, running from grace doesn't make it less real. Your grandmother always said the Virgin Mary works through broken hearts because they're already open." Isabella jerked her hands away. "I don't want to be open. I don't want to hope. Hope hurts too much when everything falls apart anyway. But even as she spoke these words of defiance, Isabella couldn't shake the memory of standing frozen on that corner, every cell in her body warning her away from danger she couldn't see. Something was watching over her, protecting her, using her, and tomorrow would bring the fourth miracle that would shatter her carefully constructed wall of disbelief. The fourth miracle came through Mrs. Patterson, Isabella's advanced biology teacher, who had been struggling with severe migraines for months. On Monday morning, Mrs. Patterson arrived at school with a new prescription from her neurologist. Isabella was sitting in the back row when she felt the familiar sensation like ice water flooding her veins. She looked up at Mrs. Patterson, who was preparing to take her morning dose, and suddenly Isabella could see it clearly. The wrong dosage, the dangerous interaction with Mrs. Patterson's blood pressure medication, the seizure that would occur within hours. "Mrs. Patterson," Isabella called out, her voice cutting through the classroom chatter, "don't take that medication." The teacher looked up, startled. "Excuse me?" Isabella stood up, her legs shaking. Every eye in the classroom was on her now, but she couldn't stop. "There's something wrong with those pills. The dosage is too high for your other medication. It could cause a seizure." Mrs. Patterson frowned, looking down at the bottle. "Isabella, this was prescribed by my specialist. He knows all my medications." "Please!" Isabella's voice cracked. "Just call the pharmacy and double-check." Oh, the classroom fell silent. After the bus accident on Friday, whispers had already been circulating about Isabella Santos and her impossible warnings. Students exchanged glances, remembering the rumors about the gas leak, the carbon monoxide poisoning, the overturned bus she'd somehow avoided. Mrs. Patterson studied Isabella's face, seeing the same desperate certainty that had saved the Martinez and Morales families. With a sigh, she picked up her phone and called the pharmacy. The conversation that followed left Mrs. Patterson white-faced and trembling. There had been an error in the prescription database. The dosage was indeed too high, dangerously so. Given Mrs. Patterson's current medications, taking the incorrect dose could have triggered a potentially fatal seizure within hours. By lunch, the story had spread throughout St. Catherine's like wildfire. Isabella Santos, the girl who had destroyed the Virgin Mary statue, had now saved 4 families from disaster in less than a week. Students gathered in small groups, their voices hushed with awe and uneasiness. How could someone predict such specific dangers? Principal Morrison found himself fielding phone calls from concerned parents throughout the afternoon. Some demanded to know what kind of supernatural activity was happening at their children's school. Others insisted their children be moved away from Isabella. But a surprising number asked if perhaps God was working through the girl who had acted out in grief and rage. Father Miguel spent the afternoon in the chapel, kneeling before the space where Rosa's statue had once stood. Fragments of marble still lay scattered nearby, swept up but not yet discarded. He whispered prayers for discernment, for wisdom in recognizing the movement of the Spirit. That evening, Carmen received a visit from 3 co-workers from the hospital. They sat around the Santos kitchen table, sharing stories they'd heard through the medical community's network. A teenage girl who seemed to know when people were in mortal danger, warnings that saved lives. "Carmen," whispered Dr. Rodriguez, who had worked with Carmen for 7 years. "People are starting to say your daughter might be receiving visions, real visions from the Virgin Mary." Isabella, listening from the hallway, felt her carefully constructed walls of denial begin to crumble. 4 miracles in 6 days, 4 impossible warnings that had saved lives. And tomorrow would bring the 5th protection, one so personal, so devastating, that it would finally force her to confront the truth she'd been running from since the night she shattered Rosa's statue in rage and despair. Tuesday morning brought the call that Carmen had been dreading. Dr. Martinez's voice was gentle but direct. Carmen's latest blood work showed her cancer had accelerated beyond their projections. The aggressive treatment wasn't working. They needed to discuss comfort care options, maybe weeks instead of months. Isabella sat in the hospital waiting room that afternoon, watching her mother sleep fitfully in the narrow bed. Carmen's skin had taken on a waxy pallor, and her breathing seemed more labored than it had been just days before. The machines beeped steadily, marking time in a rhythm that felt like a countdown. "I'm sorry, Misha," Carmen whispered when she woke, her voice barely audible. "I'm sorry I'm leaving you." "Don't," Isabella said sharply, though tears burned her eyes. "Don't talk like that." Carmen reached for her daughter's hand with trembling fingers. "I need you to promise me something. When I'm gone, don't let the anger consume you. Don't let it destroy the gift you've been given." "What gift?" Isabella's voice cracked. "Watching people I love die, knowing things I can't explain, having everyone stare at me like I'm some kind of freak. The gift of being used by God for something beautiful," Carmen said softly, "even when you can't understand it." That night, Isabella refused to leave the hospital. She curled up in the uncomfortable chair beside her mother's bed, listening to the sounds of the ICU around them. Somewhere around 3 a.m., Carmen's breathing became irregular, shallow. The monitors began beeping more rapidly. Isabella woke to see nurses rushing into the room. Dr. Martinez appeared, his face grim as he checked the machines. "She's going into cardiac distress," he told Isabella quietly. "Her body is shutting down faster than we anticipated. It could be hours." Isabella felt something break inside her chest. The walls she'd built around her heart, the anger she'd used as armor, the denial that had protected her from hope, all of it crumbled in an instant. She fell to her knees beside Carmen's bed, her grandmother's rosary somehow in her hands, though she couldn't remember picking it up. "Please," she whispered, her voice raw with desperation. I'm sorry I broke your statue. I'm sorry I didn't listen, but please don't take her yet. Please give me more time." She pressed her face against the cool bed sheets, tears flowing freely for the first time since Rosa's funeral. "Holy Mary, Mother of God, if you're really there, if Abuela Rosa was right, please help her. I'll do whatever you want. I'll listen. I'll stop fighting. Just please don't let her die tonight." The room fell silent except for Isabella's quiet sobs and the steady beeping of the monitors. And then, gradually, something changed. Carmen's breathing steadied. The frantic beeping slowed to a normal rhythm. The tension in her face relaxed and color began to return to her cheeks. Dr. Martinez stared at the monitors in confusion, checking readings twice. "I don't understand," he murmured. "Her vitals are stabilizing. Her heart rate is normalizing. This shouldn't be possible given her condition an hour ago." Carmen's eyes fluttered open, clearer than they'd been in weeks. She looked at Isabella with a smile that seemed to carry all of Rosa's love and faith. "She heard you." "Misha," Carmen whispered. "She's always been listening." For the first time since destroying the statue, Isabella felt the presence of something holy moving around them, and she understood that her journey through rage and denial had led her exactly where she needed to be, broken open and ready to receive a grace bigger than her understanding. Carmen's miraculous stabilization lasted 3 days. 3 precious days, where mother and daughter talked about Rosa, about faith, about the mysterious ways grace enters broken hearts. Carmen was weak but alert, and for the first time in months, Isabella allowed herself to hope. Thursday evening, Isabella walked home from the hospital as dusk settled over the neighborhood. She took the familiar route down Elm Street, past the gas station where Mrs. Chen had first sensed danger, past the apartment building where the Morales family had been saved. As she turned onto Maple Street, Isabella noticed something strange. A man was walking behind her, matching her pace exactly. When she slowed down, he slowed down. When she sped up, so did he. Her heart began to race as she realized he'd been following her since she left the hospital parking lot. She ducked into the alley behind Murphy's grocery store, hoping to lose him, but she heard his footsteps echoing off the brick walls. The alley was darker than she'd expected, with only one dim streetlight casting long shadows. Isabella's breath came in short gasps as she realized she was trapped. The alley was a dead end. The man appeared at the mouth of the alley, his face hidden in shadow. "Hey, girl!" His voice was rough, threatening. "I heard you got money. People talking about miracles and blessings. Hand over whatever you got." Isabella's hands trembled as she reached into her backpack. She had $40 Carmen had given her for groceries, money they couldn't afford to lose. But as her fingers touched her grandmother's rosary, something extraordinary happened. A warm light seemed to fill the alley, not from any street lamp, but from somewhere beyond the physical world. Isabella looked up and gasped. Standing beside her, translucent but unmistakably real, was Rosa. Her grandmother looked exactly as she had before cancer ravaged her body, strong, peaceful, radiant with inner light. And beside Rosa stood another figure, draped in blue. Her hands extended in the same gesture of offering that had graced the statue Isabella had destroyed. The Virgin Mary's face was filled with such compassion, such infinite love, that Isabella fell to her knees despite the danger. "Don't be afraid, Mija." Rosa's voice was clear. "She's been protecting you all along, even when you couldn't see." The man with the threatening voice stopped moving. His eyes went wide, staring at something behind Isabella, though she knew he couldn't see what she saw. His face filled with confusion, then fear. "What the—" He backed away, stumbling. "There's something wrong here." He turned and ran, his footsteps echoing down the empty street. Isabella remained on her knees, tears streaming down her face as she looked up at her grandmother and the holy figure beside her. "I'm sorry," Isabella whispered. "I'm sorry I was so angry. I'm sorry I broke the statue." The Virgin Mary smiled, and when she spoke, her voice carried all the love Isabella had been searching for since Rosa died. "Broken things can be made more beautiful than they ever were before. Your heart was broken, so it could be opened wider." Rosa reached toward Isabella, her form already beginning to fade. "Remember, Mija, she never stopped loving you, even when you stopped believing." The vision dissolved, but the peace remained. And Isabella understood that the sixth miracle wasn't just her protection. It was her complete transformation from a girl running from God to a young woman ready to embrace her calling. The next morning, Isabella returned to St. Catherine's for the first time since the miraculous week that had changed everything. Students parted like waves as she walked down the hallway, their whispered conversations following her every step. Some looked at her with awe, others with uneasiness, but everyone knew she was no longer just Isabella Santos, the angry girl who had destroyed school property. Father Miguel was waiting for her outside the chapel doors, his weathered face kind but serious. "Are you ready for this?" he asked softly. Isabella nodded. Though her heart was pounding, she had come to make amends, to face what she had destroyed in her rage and find a way to begin rebuilding, not just the statue, but her own relationship with faith. Father Miguel pushed open the heavy wooden doors, and Isabella stepped into the sacred space where her transformation had begun. She walked slowly toward the altar, her eyes fixed on the empty niche where Rosa's statue had once stood. The marble fragments had been cleared away, leaving only the bare stone pedestal as evidence of her act of destruction. But as Isabella drew closer, her steps slowed to a stop, her breath caught in her throat. The statue was there, not broken, not damaged, but whole and perfect, exactly as it had been before her fists had shattered it. The Virgin Mary stood with her hands extended in offering, her face serene and compassionate, her blue robe painted with the same ethereal beauty that time and weather had created over the years. "I don't understand," Isabella whispered, reaching out to touch the marble with trembling fingers. It was solid, real, warm under her touch, as if it had been sitting in sunlight. Father Miguel's voice was filled with wonder. "None of us understand, Isabella. I came to check on the chapel yesterday evening and it was there, whole, perfect, as if it had never been broken." Isabella sank to her knees before the statue, tears streaming down her face. "How is this possible?" The same way a teenage girl knows when strangers are in mortal danger," Father Miguel said gently. the same way a mother's heart starts beating normally when doctors say it should have stopped. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, they're meant to be lived. Over the following days, word of the restored statue spread through Denver like wildfire. Pilgrims began arriving at St. Catherine's, not just Catholics, but people of all faiths, who had heard about the girl whose rage had somehow become a conduit for miracles. They came seeking healing, hope, answers to prayers that seemed impossible. Isabella found herself at the center of something far larger than she had ever imagined. Carmen's condition continued to stabilize beyond all medical explanation. The families Isabella had warned, the Martinez, Morales, Mrs. Patterson, all became regular visitors, bringing flowers and prayers to the chapel that had become a beacon of hope. But as Isabella knelt before the mysteriously restored statue each morning before school, one question haunted her thoughts. If breaking the statue in rage had triggered 6 miracles in a week, what would embracing faith with an open heart accomplish? And why did she have the unsettling feeling that her journey was just beginning? 6 months later, Isabella Santos stood before a packed auditorium at St. Catherine's, no longer the angry, broken teenager who had once shattered a sacred statue in rage. The girl who now addressed the crowd of teenagers, parents, and clergy carried herself with quiet strength, her grandmother's rosary visible around her wrist, her mother, healthy beyond all medical explanation, sitting proudly in the front row. "I used to think that breaking something meant it was ruined forever," Isabella began, her voice steady and clear. "I thought that when life shattered your heart, when loss destroyed your faith, there was no way back to wholeness. I was wrong." The youth retreat had been Isabella's idea, a monthly gathering for teenagers struggling with grief, doubt, and the weight of impossible circumstances. She called it Broken Beautiful, and young people drove from across Colorado to attend, drawn by the story of the girl whose destruction had become a doorway to grace. "The Virgin Mary doesn't just work through perfect people," Isabella continued, her eyes finding Sophia in the audience, whose father had now been sober for a full year. "She works through shattered hearts, through angry questions, through people who think they've gone too far to ever find their way back. Sometimes the cracks in our faith become the places where the light gets in." Carmen watched from her seat, tears of gratitude streaming down her face. Her latest scan had shown no trace of cancer, a medical impossibility that Dr. Rodriguez still couldn't explain. The oncologist now sent his most hopeless patients to attend Isabella's talks, not for medical treatment, but for something medicine couldn't provide, hope that transcended understanding. The chapel at St. Catherine's had become a pilgrimage site, drawing visitors from across the country who had heard about the mysteriously restored statue and the teenage girl whose warnings had saved so many lives. The families Isabella had protected, the Martinez, the Morales, Mrs. Patterson, now volunteered as guides, sharing their stories with anyone who would listen. But Isabella always ended her talks the same way, standing beneath the very statue she had once destroyed, her voice soft with the wisdom that comes only through being broken and rebuilt. "I learned that the Virgin Mary doesn't love us despite our anger. She loves us through it. She doesn't wait for us to be perfect before she acts. She meets us in our worst moments and transforms them into something sacred. Rosa, my grandmother, always told me that, but I had to break completely before I could understand." She paused, her hand touching the rosary beads. "The miracles didn't happen because I deserved them. They happened because grace is bigger than our mistakes, stronger than our rage, and more persistent than our doubt. Sometimes you have to destroy something to discover what was unbreakable all along." If this story moved you, subscribe to Virgin Mary Mysteries so you never miss the next chapter in these extraordinary mysteries. As Isabella concluded her talk and the audience rose for closing prayers, she made her usual request. "If this story has touched your heart tonight, I want you to go home and write Broken Beautiful in the comments below this video. Let's create a prayer chain that stretches around the world. connecting everyone who understands that our cracks don't disqualify us from miracles. They make us perfect vessels for grace. The last image was of Isabella kneeling before Rosa's statue, no longer in rage or despair, but in gratitude for a love that had never stopped reaching toward her, even in her darkest moment of destruction.